Today's podcast will focus on a murder victim and what happened after his death. It all starts with the death of a child by the hand of a man that he considered a father. It ends with the exploitation of the boy's body. For a few months, the victim was simply known as the Child of La Villette, and the mystery surrounding his murder caught the imagination of Paris. Once transported to the morgue of Paris, the small body became an object of curiosity. Thousands and thousands of visitors swarmed the morgue to catch a glimpse of the child. He became the talk of tout Paris. Everyone imagines the story behind the horrifying murder. Who could this child be? Maybe he's of noble origin and his death holds some dark intrigue. Elegant horse-drawn carriages bring curious visitors to the morbid spectacle. Among them is a young actress visiting every single day. She confides that she is so attached to the boy that she would be distressed if she was not there when someone identifies the body. For months, the body was exposed at the morgue, and people queued to catch a glimpse. While they commiserate on the victim, they also curse the murderer, and they admire the magnificent results of the science before them. Because the body of the child is somehow the epitome of the success of science over the ugliness of death. The body has been embalmed using a process invented by a chemist, N Gannal. The publicity surrounding the child's body generated attention, and soon enough people started to talk about the Gannal process. Such publicity was more than welcome for a man that was trying to carve his way in the market, in which doctors had the lion's share. Gannal did everything to create interest, advertising his process to gain more customers and generate more income. So today, we will look briefly at the grisly murder, as for once it is not the focus of the case. It helps to establish the circumstances and bring humanity to the tale. Case 3 is about the corpse of a young boy, and it is also about a man who did everything in his power to be noticed by his scientific peers. Vincent Eliçabide was born in 1810. He is described as a bright student. At school, he was praised and admired by schoolmates and teachers alike. His intelligence marked him as a prodigy. Soon, he wants to be a priest, and at 14 years old, he joins a seminary. But it doesn't last. Just 4 years later, aged 18, rather abruptly, Vincent announces that he no longer wants to join the church. At this point, his career shifts, and he works as a teacher. Subsequently, he meets Marie, the mother of one of his pupils, a boy called Joseph, and they fall in love. Marie is actually a widower, and she raises her 2 children alone. Joseph, who was born in 1829, and Mathilde, born in 1831. Marie and Vincent enjoy their romance together. She is entranced by this seemingly kind, intelligent teacher. But sadly, in October 1838, Vincent has made up his mind to follow another of his dreams. He leaves the town of Betterham in the south of France where they live and travels the 800 miles to Paris to seek his fortune. However, his dream turns sour quickly as success escapes him. Vincent doesn't confess the failure to his lover Marie. He even encourages her to send Joseph to join him in Paris. Vincent announces that he's found a position in the city as a teacher, and the school has offered a place to the young boy. Upon hearing this wonderful good news, Marie relents. On the 14th of March 1840, her son Joseph arrives in Paris. Vincent welcomes the child warmly at the train station. They hug. The boy is very happy to see the man he considers a father. They go out for dinner. During the meal, Vincent writes a letter to Marie and asks little Joseph to add a personal message. The boy confirms his arrival and also sends kisses to his mother and younger sister. When his mother receives the letter a few days later, Joseph is already dead. Leaving the restaurant, Vincent and Joseph wandered through the cobbled streets. In a secluded cul-de-sac, Vincent strikes Joseph several times with a hammer. He leaves the body behind and disappears into the night. When found, the authorities are unable to identify Joseph as he doesn't carry any identification papers. And why would he? He's just an 11-year-old boy. Meanwhile, Vincent carries on his web of lies. He writes to Marie, telling her that Joseph is happy and safe, and also asks her to come to Paris with her daughter. He states that he has found her a position as a housekeeper for a well-off family in the city. So, on the 6th of May, 1840, just a couple of months after Joseph's cruel murder, Marie and Mathilde leave Betterham to go to Bordeaux to meet Vincent. The plan this time is to introduce Marie and Mathilde to Vincent's sister, who lives near Bordeaux, then travel on to Paris. They go on foot. At some point in the journey, Vincent murders Marie and her young daughter. He hides their bodies and flees the scene, but the bodies are found by passers-by. Soon enough, the news about the gruesome discovery spread and reached Bordeaux. An innkeeper reports that a customer had come into the inn with bloodstains all over his clothes, and thankfully, Vincent is arrested. The trial in court tries to find the reasons behind these senseless murders. Vincent Eliçabide is described as a bright, young man, but also taciturn, sulking, unable to face his failures. While living in poverty in Paris, he wrote to Marie that he was living very well. Was he unable to accept that he was a mere human, while his besotted lover saw him as a god? Some of the witnesses have difficulties reconciling the image of the gifted young man from the faraway town and the soulless murderer sitting before them. According to Vincent's family, demonic possession explains the tragedy that took place. Nevertheless, in September 1840, Vincent was executed. The day after his murder, the small, cold body of Joseph is found by passers-by. The child did not carry any form of identification. As he was wearing his best clothes to meet Vincent at the train station, people assumed that the child is born of well-off peasants. The authorities transferred the body to the nearest police station and display it there in the hopes that someone will identify him. People swarm the place, but there is no identification. Little do they know the boy is from so far away near the Spanish border. The police persist, hoping that showing the body can help to catch the murderer. One visitor acts suspiciously and is promptly arrested. He wears a shirt covered with stains that look like blood. But he is released once it proves that he is not linked to the murder. After 2 more days, following the rules in place, the authorities transfer the body of the child to the morgue of Paris, situated on the island city, Île de la Cité. This is the place the unidentified bodies of drowning and violent crime end up, and it is vast. To avoid its deterioration, the judge of instruction asks Jean-Nicolas Gannal to embalm the boy's body. Exhibition of the body to the public allowed the possible identification of the victim by gathering information from those who could have met him when he was alive. If the victim was spotted in a certain location, it would provide a timeline and kickstart an investigation. To help, the clothes and trinkets are hung on hooks next to the boy's corpse. Policemen are posted to regulate the crowd and arrest anyone acting suspiciously, all in the hope that the murderer is remorseful or filled by morbid curiosity for his crime and would visit. While the main purpose of the morgue of Paris is to expose the unidentified bodies, as the years passed by, what was initially a practical approach shifted to have an entertainment value. While some came to the morgue in the hope to find their missing loved ones, others visited purely for the macabre show. Some days it is reported that around 40,000 people visited the place. The working man rubbing shoulders with the aristocrat, the young couple on their first date, the family on a leisurely daily stroll. The grim place was even listed in the travel guides used by tourists. For 3 long months, the murdered child is a central attraction of the morgue. Once embalmed, put on a bed, his clothes displayed, visitors pushed by macabre curiosity gather to observe this miracle of science. It is the talk of Paris. But why? Well, one newspaper states, "This child became to the eyes of people thirsty for free shows an authentic occasion to admire this imitation of a living being. This child exposed at the morgue was similar in all sense to an animated creature." When pondering on the Magdalene mystery, the newspapers endlessly mention that the body has been preserved by using a new embalming method. Everyone admits the result is astonishing. The young boy looks alive. For the first time, the judge in charge of the inquest had requested for N Gannal to do the embalming, and it was a thundering PR success for this struggling inventor and entrepreneur. Everybody is now aware of the existence of the Gannal process of embalming. N Gannal, sometimes pronounced Gannal in America and the UK, is a pharmacist, a chemist, and an inventor with a colourful past. Born in the east of France in the region of Moselle, the man joined the Imperial Army and became an interpreter because of his fluency in German. N Gannal followed the emperor to Russia, got captured by the enemy, escaped from a Lithuanian prison, returned to France, and re-enlisted in the army. He was a man of determination. After finally leaving the army, he decided to learn chemistry as an autodidact, self-taught. He worked as a preparator, a person who prepares scientific specimens for museum displays. He also creates new processes, like how to treat tuberculosis using fumigation, a way to make artificial diamonds, manufacturing ink, and his own shoe shine. Then, in the 1830s, he turned his attention to find a way to preserve the human bodies and body parts for medical anatomy courses. Based on his research, he then develops an embalming fluid. His new method is injecting it through the carotid artery. It helps to preserve the body, but also avoids all the drawbacks of the traditional method. In 19th century France, embalming was considered rare and unusual. It was reserved for the social elite, like kings, prelates, or saints. The main purpose was to avoid putrefaction. As funeral rites were complex, it could take days before the body was transported and buried. The organs were removed and then put in urns, then the cavities were filled with herbs and perfumes to cover the smell. Finally, the body was enveloped with bands of fabric. This traditional process was also extremely expensive. As an example, the embalming of King Louis XVIII cost 30,000 francs. That's around 98,000 euros or 116,000 US dollars today. Public display of the corpse was not required. It was just considered tradition to embalm and preserve the body. So to summarise, embalming the body used to mean removal of the organs and stuffing it with herbs and perfumes just to cover the odour of decay. The Gannal process offered a far better solution. Its creator did everything to trumpet about the superiority of the method because it was so vastly different to what had gone before. The process required just a small incision in the carotid artery to inject the secret formula without performing any mutilation on the body. The fluid was safe to use because he said it didn't contain arsenic, and the body can be kept lifelike. As well as this improvement in the method, for embalming a child, Gannal offered competitive prices between 700 and 1,000 francs. That's around 3,270 euros or $3,880 at most in today's money. Sometimes he even offered his services for free to poor families. Now embalming became democratic. A well-off shopkeeper can dream to end his life like a fabled pharaoh. After presenting his findings to the Academies of Medicine and Sciences, Gannal receives their congratulations and a monetary prize. In 1837, he applied for a patent for his process. The success of his method is slow. In 1836, he embalmed just 5 bodies. In 1837, 16 bodies. Then, by 1840, there was a big jump. The count was 108 bodies, and the number remained steady until 1843. It is easy to see the correlation between the exposition of the body of the embalmed child and the rising popularity of the Gannal process. However, it is also the result of a rather aggressive marketing strategy. To drum up interest, the headstrong chemist employed very blunt tactics. In one instance, on the 31st of December 1847, he sent 100,000 cards in perfumed envelopes to advertise his services. One journalist mocked this mass mailing campaign, imagining the very sick and the very old becoming distressed after receiving an offer from an embalmer providing funeral services. Gannal adopted strategies that highlighted the quality of his work. The exposition of products of French industry in 1839 was a prime showcase for him. He exposed embalmed animals as the event had forbidden the showing of human bodies. However, the interested people could choose to visit his lab. There, visitors could examine embalmed specimens and even the body of another young boy. Such examinations would prove the absence of mutilation to the corpse. Gannal fiercely protected his process, attacking through letters or pamphlets those pretending to be his disciples or franchisees, suing when necessary. Gannal is rather vocal when it comes to his rights and his innovation. Those authorised to use his method have acquired the right to do so and were trained by him. Dr. Ispen, who embalmed the late Danish king, claimed he was using the Gannal process. The inventor angrily denied that Dr. Ispen embalmed the body according to his method. He demanded the exhumation of the dead king to prove his claim. Gannal creates a network of franchisees through France and several European and South American countries. By 1843, the network extended to 37 French departments and countries like Cuba, Russia, England, Mexico and La Havana. The inventor eagerly attends the exhumations of bodies he has embalmed, inviting witnesses and pushing for the drafting of reports proving the validity of his claims. Before the exhumation of a young girl for the purpose of creating a death mask, he sent invites to several important persons. Following the publication of the report, the father of the young girl sent a letter to several newspapers decrying the publicity around the exhumation. While thankful for the interest and the kindness of Gannal after the death of his daughter, he never agreed to have his name and family to be part of this stunt. Gannal writes pamphlets addressed to the public or letters to newspapers to attack his rivals or defend his innovation and embalming, depending on what was happening at the time. In a pamphlet written in 1846, Gannal defends his art and science. For him, the traditional method of embalming is expensive and mutilating, and it has been around for millennia. This new method protects the integrity of the body in the long term. The formula is safe and doesn't contain poisons like arsenic, an affirmation that will later prove to be false. Embalming has a long tradition. It's even said that Jesus Christ was embalmed. By using this method, the living show respect towards the dead. Embalming stretched across continents in the ancient world. Many methods were employed to preserve the bodies and souls of a deceased. In 19th century France, there were other important practical aspects for embalming that were useful for society. It helped the identification of unknown victims, of which there were an unfortunate number. As well as this, it prevented a situation that most people claim is their worst nightmare even today. It protected a comatose person from being buried alive. In 1838, a man awoke when Gannal was preparing him. The use of embalming could also resolve the issue of graveyards being viewed as unsanitary places. This happened most in cities because the gas from the decomposition was believed to poison the air and cause diseases. Embalming had caught the public's popular imagination. A newspaper declared that the people, always fair and naive in their judgment, are astonished by this phenomenon. It is undoubtedly the greatest success Mr. Gannal will ever obtain. This sudden popularity of embalming corresponded to a change in the funeral tradition. Several French historians have called it the funeral transition. In short, it's a shift occurring between the old and the modern funeral tradition during the 19th century. The church is no longer the focal point of a ceremony. Now, the end of a service takes place in the graveyard, a location which people can visit and mourn again and again at the gravesite. As a consequence, the deceased body transforms into something to be revered, almost like a shrine. So, the importance of keeping its integrity becomes paramount. Requests for embalming now come from private homes, not police departments or hospitals. And these reasons for embalming no longer have a practical purpose. Instead, it helps to crystallise private grief. The body becomes the focus of mourning. For those visiting the morgue of Paris to see little Joseph, the unknown child of La Villette, it could have been because of curiosity, but it could also be an occasion to reflect on death in general. When Vincent Eliçabide is arrested for the murder of Marie and young Mathilde, finally Paris breathes a sigh of relief. This is because the unknown child now has a possible name and his murderer has almost certainly been caught. On the 2nd of June 1840, the body was transferred to Bordeaux for the needs of the investigation pertaining to Vincent's second victims and to link the crimes even though they are cities apart. Vincent confirms it is the same boy, Joseph, lying in the oak coffin. Before closing its lid, 2 doctors present at the time eagerly examine the body to confirm the wonders of a Gannal embalming process. In August 1840, Joseph was finally buried beside his mother and sister. Some would think that his journey has ended and he can rest in peace. In this respect, you are wrong, because in 1842, less than 2 years after burial, Joseph's body was taken out of his grave. But why? Well, at the time, Gannal was fighting for the survival of his business model. He needed to defend the revolutionary invention and prove its superiority over other embalming methods. Writing open letters to newspapers, to the Academy of Science, to doctors, he keeps reminding them of his great successes, in which the child of La Villette holds the highest place. So, for a brief instant, Joseph again becomes the object of scrutiny. Once the body has been replaced into the ground, the mayor sends a report confirming the absence of putrefaction. The memory of the child of La Villette slowly fades away. In the meantime, Jean-Nicolas Gannal kept crowing loudly about how his method outshined any other. Soon, this would be his Achilles heel, as he faced major setbacks damaging his reputation and business model. Let us expand on his final decades. Over the years, Gannal eagerly stepped on a lot of toes, particularly in the medical profession. His boasting and his aggressive advertising had caused a backlash within a profession that looked with contempt on those encroaching on their territory. Doctors were fighting to keep a foothold in a very lucrative market that Gannal protected ferociously with his patent. His constant attacks on the medical profession increased their distrust. Some accused the embalmer of using bodies as a commodity and not as objects deserving respect. Mr. Gannal has shown that by exploiting his patients, such a greed that revolts all the honest hearts, how could you not feel indignation watching the dead be degraded to the point to be labelled an industry object, a patent matter? For some, the preservation of human remains must be the concern of everyone and not a monopoly held by one man. The trial opposing Gannal was headed by Dr. Marshall and took place in 1843. It offered both camps to confront their perception on the subject. Gannal sues Marshall for having used his method without authorization. A few months prior to the trial, the doctor demonstrated, in front of the Academy of Sciences, that any doctor can embalm by injecting his own formula through an incision and achieve the same result as Gannal. The inventor turned chemist's counterattack that there is an infringement because the injection is an intrinsic part of the patent. False, replies the opposing party. The human body is not a commodity that can be sold or exploited. Pushing the argument to the extreme, it can raise a thorny ethical issue. If considered a commodity, then an embalmed body could be confiscated. The judge concludes the patent covers both the injection through the carotid artery and the chemical composition of the fluid. He then rejects the idea that the injection is patentable as the subject's body cannot be covered by a patent. Moreover, Gannal's lawyer argues that the embalmer's job starts when the surgeon or doctor's job ends, but the judge concludes that making injections remains a surgical act. Gannal lost the lawsuit. Now anybody can embalm using the injection method. The monopoly is broken, which is a huge setback for Gannal. During the trial, the distrust of the medical profession towards him is apparent. His thirst for publicity and hubris are denounced. After all, he has lithographs at the trial displaying his portrait and business address. He then attacks doctors through open letters to the press, pamphlets, etc., accusing them of doing botched jobs when it comes to embalming. The doctors are now not alone in their scepticism towards Gannal. Among the French public, some voice different concerns about embalming. They are afraid of what could happen if embalming became a large-scale operation. After all, dust to dust means that bodies degrade and leave space for the living and future corpses. If the practice of embalming remained popular and successful, then with the growth of mankind's population, we could run out of space because bodies would pile up. They worried that it could end in a struggle between the dead and the living, the latter unable to escape to death due to Gannal's process. This was going against the will of God. Losing the trial against Dr. Marshall was a huge setback for Gannal, and it was not his last. Between 1845 and 1846, a test of comparison between three methods of embalmment took place in front of a commission of the Academy of Medicine. After treatment, the bodies were buried as normal and then exhumed 15 months later. Gannal's cadaver showed advanced putrefaction. His rival, Suquet, is declared the winner. It proves that other methods do work, and because of the lack of regulations, anybody could become an embalmer. It was over. Gannal's business collapsed. In addition to this harsh blow, tests made on the embalming fluid detected arsenic, making Gannal's claims regarding the safety of the product completely invalid. Not everything is lost though. Gannal's works and efforts to popularise his method had a greater impact outside of France. In the US, for example, his book, History of Embalming and the Preparation of Anatomy Parts, became a bestseller after being translated. It was also the reference when it came to anything regarding embalming and the injection method. The American Civil War boosted the practice of embalming by injection, as this method offered a solution to the issues generated by transporting and exposition of the bodies of soldiers killed in action. While mostly forgotten nowadays, Gannal can be recognised as a major influence in the rise of embalming in the US. People have long forgotten the different roles the murdered boy Joseph was given. The young victim of a callous man, the son and brother to murder victims, the object of curious regard, the subject of scrutiny and open discussion between scientific professionals, an advertising device who became the talk of the town. We have conjured his sad story for this podcast, and now it is time for him to fade back into obscurity, letting him respectfully return to his eternal rest.